Hello YouTubers, my name is Frederick Lopez and you are in a new episode of The Final Cut. Today I'm going to be going over my review of Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, to get things out in the open, it is the 7th installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but unlike the previous installments, it doesn't continue the story, and in fact, like in real life, the previous installments are movies. Yes, this is one of the early attempts at meta horror films, and I would say Wes Craven's work in this is almost a precursor to his work in 1996 film Scream, as far as just being meta. Heather Langenkamp, John Sachs, and Robert Englund returned. Majority of the cast and crew from various Nightmare on Elm Streets and mostly the original return, including writer-director Wes Craven. But the catch is that they're playing themselves. Heather Langenkamp's introduced as herself. Now, there may be a bit exaggerated as far as Robert Englund and Wes Craven, but the whole idea is that it's in the real world. New Line Cinema killed off Freddy like they did in the last movies, like in real life. And Wes Craven has an idea for a new installment, and they're asking Heather Langenkamp to be involved. And she keeps getting these calls from a stalker. So she was dealing with a stalker in her real career and had to move to London for 5 months and then came back. So Wes Craven got permission to use that element of a stalker contacting her in the script. But it's kind of like almost like a Freddy Krueger vibe, and it's just something otherworldly. It shows the impact of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, not only on Heather Langenkamp, but Robert Englund. They go to this press event. It's the 10th year anniversary of the first Nightmare on Elm Street. So this takes place in 1994. The original came out in 1984. And you get to see like Freddy Krueger as this pop culture phenomenon. Kids love him. And supposedly that came about because Wes Craven and Robert Englund were on some show about like violence in cinema. Is it good for kids? And the kids kept on chanting, "Freddy, Freddy." So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Anyway, he gets a lot of autographs, she doesn't, so it shows like their real lives. And she gets contacted by Robert Shea, the actual producer. You actually get to see New Line Cinema's headquarters, that Wes Craven is writing a new film. The catch is, there is this Freddy Krueger that exists, and he's coming out of the movie world, so to speak. Robert Englund is himself, but he also plays the role of Freddy, or should I say Freddy Krueger does. In the credits it says Freddy Krueger's played by himself. And the whole basis of it is Wes Craven trying to come up with a script to trap the genie in the bottle. Supposedly there has been this ancient evil throughout the dawn of time. Maybe like Satan, I don't know, just evil itself, evil incarnate, that's been trapped inside stories. Basically, the Nightmare on Elm Street film series was a conduit to trap this evil in modern time. And since they stopped making the film, since they started making Freddy more comedic, people stopped becoming afraid of him. The films died. And now this evil, after a couple of years since the last film, has finally reached a level of coming out into the real world. And Heather Langenkamp keeps having dreams of Freddy Krueger nightmares, and it's almost like the movie world is blending into the real world. You start having earthquakes, and it's crazy because it was around the time of the Northridge earthquake, this giant 7.1, and that was actually written in the script, and that happened in real life, so they got B-roll footage of real earthquake locations, and the cast and crew were like, did you make a deal with the devil or something, Wes? And she's like, no. But it's just so crazy because just everything as far as making the film and then in the film is just blending. But it's a brilliant film. To put it shortly, if any of y'all are confused out there, it's Last Action Hero for horror films. Freddy Krueger is coming out into the real world. And Heather Langenkamp has to play the role of Nancy and go through with it in order to stop Freddy Krueger. Wes Craven explains in the film that Nancy was the first person to defeat him, so she must be the last person to basically trap that evil once and for all. And Freddy starts to not only target her, but her husband. Miko Hughes plays her son, and he's basically targeting him. The kid's having nightmares and just some real shining stuff, just like evil stuff. And he's going through a lot of issues. So everything is at stake for her as an individual, and then her character, Nancy, once everything starts to blend together. So in short, Heather Langenkamp has to become Nancy in order to defeat this real Freddy Krueger, to defeat this evil from coming into the real world. A lot of it has influence of the Grimm brothers' tale, Hansel and Gretel. It's very much like Hansel and Gretel. Freddy Krueger, this evil's like the witch. Heather Langenkamp and her son are pretty much Hansel and Gretel. But Wes Craven creates such an intelligent script here. Originally, Robert Shaye kind of wanted to do another Freddy Krueger film and was talking to Wes, and Wes didn't get a lot of residuals from the video cassettes and merchandise from the first Nightmare, and he felt he was kind of wronged in that regard. So Robert Shaye just gave him a percentage, and they put all their differences under the bridge. And Wes Craven said he jumped the shark and decided to make another one. And he went and rewatched the whole series of films, 2 through 6, and he's just like, I don't know how to continue this. I don't get the plot, which I don't blame him. Not many people do. And he just thought, you know what? Why don't I have something different? Why don't I have this evil come out into the real world? That maybe this evil was manifested and just contained within the character of Freddy Krueger. And now that the films are over, this evil itself, evil incarnate, is going to come out into the real world unless we make another film to trap it. And such a brilliant thing. In the film, he says there's poems, stories, different types of storytelling that has trapped this evil. And it's very original in that regard. And part of the reason why he didn't come up with another horror movie like Nightmare on Elm Street is he told Robert Shaye, it's just like, I just haven't had a really good nightmare in a while. And yeah, it is a really well-crafted film, and is my favorite, one of my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street films. I keep flipping between this and Dream Warriors, but I think this is my second favorite under the original. And both of them are done by Wes Craven. The acting's excellent. Of course, a lot of the actors are playing themselves, but there are certain moments where they have to be the other person. So like John Saxon's there as John Saxon, and then he just turns to Nancy's father. And once Nancy says, I love you, Dad, she becomes Nancy, and Freddy Krueger is unleashed, and it's like a final battle. Just stuff like that as far as the acting. And also, Miko Hughes had to go through a lot. You may recognize him from Pet Sematary. Yeah, he had to go through a lot, poor kid. But they really got a bad way to get him to act a certain way and just panic. And his parents don't like using it, but his dad pretty much went over to him and whispered in his ear, he's like, your mother has died. And that got him to act that way. It's just so messed up, but you know, it got the job done. And Robert Englund is perfect in this. It's kind of cool because you get to see Robert Englund as a person, and then as Freddy Krueger, this evil entity. And the makeup! They changed the makeup, modernized him, they gave him leather pants, a trench coat, almost like a bone, like cybernetic claw. And then instead of a burnt face, it's almost like his skin's peeling, like that of an anatomy book. It's just very evil look. And that's one thing I love about Wes Craven's work in this. He brought Freddy back to just being evil. There is some one-liners, but they're sadistic and just all around malevolent. He's not the jokester. He's not the parody version of himself. Freddy Krueger's back to being a menacing son of a bitch like he was in the first film, and just pure evil. And in fact, in many ways, he's actually just a little bit more evil in some parts in this film. There's some crazy dream sequences. He appears in the clouds. There's all the Freddy heads. The highway scene was intense, where Miko's in the middle of the highway and Heather Langenkamp has to get him. And they did a cool shot. Supposedly it was like 50 to 100 takes of her crouching to duck when an 18-wheeler came by. And they did that by projecting. They filmed the footage and then had on a projector, and then she had to go down at the right mark to make it seem like it went over her. Great practical filmmaking right there. Her husband's a special effects guy, and it's cool because her husband in real life is a special effects person, but he declined to appear as himself in the movie because he believed there would be a curse, which I don't blame him. But the actor who played her husband said he felt like a dork because he's like all clean cut, shirt tucked in, and everybody was wearing like Megadeth shirts and beards and look real blue collar workers in the special effects team, so I find that funny. But yeah, supposedly Miko Hughes got to keep the playground where he fell off in, and that's one great thing. There's this part where he's like, after his father died, he's reaching up to the sky when Heather Langenkamp is talking to John Saxon. She catches him when he falls, and then he's just like, God wouldn't take me. And it's just some crazy themes in this. And Wes Craven's not afraid to have some scary elements in broad daylight. And then that was also sad because you get to see through a child's point of view. It's like a parent is dead and he's trying to like process this death. It's just really sad. Even though his dad died singing Losing My Religion by R.E.M. And then that whole funeral scene was cool. You got to see cameos. Jesse Garcia, Tuesday Night. And originally they wanted Johnny Depp, but Wes Craven never got the stomach to ask him. And he ran into him a couple of years after and said, would you have starred? And Johnny Depp's like, yeah, I would have starred. Anyway, that would have been kind of cool, but you got the majority of everybody involved from a Nightmare on Elm Street series. And then that whole nightmare scene with the earthquake and then her husband's body coming out of the casket and Freddy taking the kid. Just some all-around evil stuff. The hospital scene was very frightening. The kid throwing up, and then the nurse is just like, gotta get some evil out of him. And the nurse's name was actually based upon a guy at the MPAA that always gave Wes Craven a hard time with the films and stuff that needed to be cut out of his horror films, so I find that funny. Yeah, it is, and then Lynn Shay, the sister of the producer, she played a teacher in the original. She plays a nurse in this one, and it's just an all-around crazy film. Is it the scariest? No, but there is a lot of thrills and suspense, and like I said in my last review of Freddy's Dead, you don't have to be scary to be a good horror film. This kind of goes past a horror film. This is just a well-crafted film. And it's such a shame that we lost Wes Craven, but his legacy would be remembered. Not many people get to be known as redefining the horror genre in the 80s and 90s. And this is a precursor to Scream, but this was released in the same week as Pulp Fiction. So it didn't do very well at the box office, but I feel that over time it's kind of had a cult following. It was well received with both the critics and audience at the time, so I feel like it's kind of gaining some steam again in its afterlife. And I think part of it was because it was ahead of its time. And even though it was well reviewed, I still feel that this is a very, very underrated horror film. So before I go on to more thoughts, I'm going to score Wes Craven's A New Nightmare a 5 out of 5, a 10 out of 10, and an A+. There's some flaws, yes, but those flaws aren't enough for me to knock it down and score. It's just an all-around well-crafted film, and if you love horror films, and especially the Nightmare on Elm Street films, you're going to really love this film, because this one's like a love letter to everything that made the character memorable in the first place from the first film. Wes Craven gets to end the series on his terms, and it's wonderful. It's probably the best 7th installment, as well as Halloween H2O, where you get some of the original people back, and they just end it the right way, the way it needs to be done. But this, unlike any other sequel, does something entirely original, which is very rare. To have a 7th installment that's not really a direct sequel to the previous 6, but do something completely different where it stands on its own, and that's a great thing as far as a sequel and a film to stand on its own. You don't have to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street to watch this. Even though it would help, you don't really have to. But yeah, when Nancy goes into the underworld, the demonic Freddy, there's some crazy stuff there. Practical effects with his tongue going over her, him trying to swallow her son's head, and there's a giant animatronic. And supposedly he was really evil there, and then there's like the 7 deadly sins written on the wall. She's reading the script, and that's one scary part about him writing the script. There's a scene where he's talking to Nancy, Wes Craven is, and what he's saying is on his computer on like the script program, and I was just like, whoa! So then she reads the script and everything is like following the script. It's just so meta. That's an overused word nowadays, but meta. It's meta. And that final battle's great. The music, it kind of has more of a heroic tone. It's not as scary as the previous ones, but something about it gets you kind of excited. So even though there's thrills and suspense, it almost has like an action film vibe when it gets to the end. And the brilliant thing is that Freddy Krueger's not in it that much. Now some argue that may be a bad thing, but it's like the first one where like there's glimpses, certain hints, and then when it gets to that third act, it gets to that third act, and it is worth it. Freddy Krueger coming out, the music, and then Wes Craven pays a Nosferatu homage. He also pays homage to Repulsion with the earthquake and like the wall cracking to 4 claws. That was cool. Just different stuff all around. But having a creature come out into the real world is something scary. Like I said, the only other movie I've seen something like that is Last Action Hero. But this, what I found interesting is that evil itself has been around since the dawn of mankind, and that we as humans have always written stories, certain types of art, different types of storytelling to contain this evil. And that's very original, and also something kind of fundamental on the human condition, on the human basis, that just gets down to themes of humanity. And it's a much deeper film in that regard, not only as a new scary film, but it brings a lot of deep messages. And Wes Craven always did that in his films, and that's a great thing about horror films. You can talk about a lot of deeper issues and just like topics inside a horror film, even though it's this type of genre that's not really looked upon very well that it might not be considered for Oscars. There's some great storytelling within horror films, especially well-made horror films like this film, that I feel get overlooked and, in fact, may tell stories a bit better than some films that are nominated for Oscars. So yeah, Wes Craven, I'm going to miss him. I wanted to meet him one day in person, but I never got to. But this is definitely one of my favorite films of his, and it's nice to see him end Freddy Krueger on his own terms, and this is a really fantastically made film. From the effects are top-notch, and the way he explodes, he almost goes into like the devil at the end when it explodes, and then they get out going through the sheets, and then reading the script. Thank you for giving Nancy her strength. There's a message from Wes Craven in the script. She's reading, and then it like starts the movie over again. So you can almost watch it and then re-watch, and it's like an endless loop. The movie just is like full circle and an endless loop. It ends with the dialogue and scenes that were described at the beginning of the film, and I find that amazing. It's a whole film. And it in fact is a new nightmare, and Wes Craven did present us with a new nightmare. Robert Englund gave a fantastic performance as Freddy. It was nice seeing him be evil again without being jokester. And yeah, they did a rotating room again. He kills Julie, and then he's like talking to the kids like, hey, you ever play Skin the Cat? And he's just like tossing her, and it's crazy because we actually get to see Freddy Krueger pull her. So they're on a rotating room, and they did a whole bunch of stuff like that. It's very crazy. And yeah, I'm trying to figure out what else to talk about this film. I love this film so much, but I feel like I'm missing something. But that's pretty much my review and thoughts of Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. And yes, it makes the final cut. Wes Craven's New Nightmare is one of the best horror films I have seen in my life. It's one of the best Nightmare on Elm Street films in the series, the original 7. And yeah, definitely was one of Wes Craven's most underrated films. And in fact is kind of a precursor to what came after with Scream. The Scream trilogy. So yeah, definitely check out New Nightmare if you haven't. And if you haven't checked out the others, check out all the Nightmare on Elm Street series. They're pretty good in their own right. And some are stronger than others, but they're all good in their own right. Some of them more imaginative. But yeah, definitely check them out for Halloween. Check this film out for Halloween. And if you want to, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and check out my other reviews. I did all the Nightmare on Elm Street films, as well as Freddy vs. Jason previously before this. Well, that does it for the Freddy Krueger reviews. Yeah, let me know what you think about New Nightmare. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Is it your favorite? What's your favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film? What are your favorite moments in New Nightmare? And what's your favorite Wes Craven film? Just let me know. And then next time, catch my review of Scream 3, and then I'm going to review Scream 4 to tell you that heads are going to roll.
Anyway, sweet dreams!